Throughout history, certain conflicts reshape not only the nations that fight them, but the entire world watching from afar. The American Civil War was one of those defining moments. It was not only a battle between North and South, it was a global classroom, a turning point that revealed powerful lessons about humanity, governance, justice, unity, and the evolution of modern nations. The world learned that a nation divided against itself cannot thrive. The American Civil War showed that internal fractures, whether rooted in politics, economics, or morality, can escalate into destructive conflict when left unresolved. Countries watched the United States, a young democracy, nearly crumble under the weight of its contradictions. And from this, they understood the importance of confronting deep national problems before they turn into national disasters. The war also taught a profound moral lesson. A society built on injustice cannot last. The abolition of slavery became a signal to the world that human freedom is not negotiable. It inspired reformers, encouraged abolitionist movements, and proved that nations must align their values with the basic rights of every human being if they wish to progress. The Civil War further demonstrated that leadership matters. Abraham Lincoln's ability to balance strength with compassion, conviction with humility, taught countries that moral clarity in moments of crisis can determine the fate of a nation. His resolve became a blueprint for future leaders facing internal conflict. The world also witnessed the rise of modern warfare. Technology, logistics, industry, and strategy transformed during the Civil War, setting a foundation for military tactics that echoed into the 20th century. From railroads to telegraphs to mass mobilization, observers realized that industrial power would determine the outcomes of future wars. Finally, the American Civil War taught that reconciliation is the hardest battle of all. After the guns fell silent, the challenge was not only rebuilding cities. It was rebuilding trust, restoring unity, and reshaping identity. Nations around the world learned that victory alone does not heal a nation. Dignity, justice, and deliberate reconstruction are equally essential. The American Civil War was more than a conflict. It was a lesson written in blood, sacrifice, and transformation. It left behind insights that still guide nations today, reminding the world that unity must be protected. Justice must be pursued, and freedom must always be defended. The American Civil War taught the world that a nation's greatest threat often comes from within, not from outside. Countries watching the conflict realized that internal division, whether caused by political differences, economic inequalities, or moral disagreements, can quickly turn into a full-scale national collapse if not handled with wisdom. The United States, once seen as a rising symbol of democracy, nearly destroyed itself because it failed to confront its contradictions early. This showed other nations that unity is not just a slogan. It is a lifeline that must be protected. The war revealed that nations must create systems that allow disagreements to be resolved through dialogue, justice, and reforms rather than violence. The survival of any nation depends on its ability to heal internal wounds, address inequalities, and build a sense of shared identity strong enough to withstand conflict. The Civil War proved to the world that a society built on exploitation and inequality cannot last forever. Slavery was not just an American issue. It was a global moral question. When the United States fought a devastating war over this system, nations around the world saw the consequences of allowing injustice to sit at the heart of a society. The war demonstrated that oppressed people do not remain silent forever, and that political structures built on inequality eventually collapse under their own weight. The global community learned that moral questions, when ignored, grow into political crises. The abolition of slavery sent a message across continents. True progress comes only when every human being is valued. Many nations began rethinking their own laws, colonial structures, and social hierarchies because they witnessed the heavy cost America paid for refusing to confront injustice sooner. Abraham Lincoln became a global example of how leadership can shape the destiny of a nation. Countries realized that in times of crisis, the quality of leadership determines whether a nation collapses or transforms. Lincoln showed the world that leadership built on courage, humility, patience, and moral conviction can inspire people even in the darkest moments. He faced criticism, threats, and unimaginable pressure, yet remained committed to unity and justice. The world saw that a leader must be willing to make difficult decisions, speak uncomfortable truths, and carry the weight of national trauma with dignity. His example proved that leaders who place the nation above personal gain can guide their people through chaos and rebuild a country stronger than before. The American Civil War introduced a new era of military technology and strategy that shocked the world. Nations observed how railroads transported troops at unprecedented speed, how telegraphs transmitted battlefield decisions instantly, and how industrial production replaced traditional warfare with mass, manufactured weapons. For the first time, war became a test of economic strength, technological innovation, and industrial capacity. Observers realized that the world was entering a modern age in which conflicts would be fought not only on battlefields, but in factories, communication networks, and logistical systems. The Civil War's scale of destruction revealed that industrialized warfare had the power to reshape nations and redefine global military strategy for generations to come. The Civil War showed the world that no democracy is perfect, and that even the most idealistic nations can fall into crisis when their actions do not match their principles. The United States declared itself a land of freedom, yet practiced slavery. This contradiction created decades of tension that eventually exploded into war. Democracies across the world learned that they must address their internal weaknesses, inequality, corruption, discrimination, and inconsistent laws, before these flaws grow into national threats. This Civil War became a warning that ignoring deep structural problems only postpones disaster. If a nation claims to stand for liberty, equality, and justice, it must actively work to ensure that every citizen experiences those ideals in reality, not just in speeches. Before the Civil War, the United States was a collection of regions with different cultures and priorities. After the war, the nation was forced to redefine who it was and what it stood for. The world learned that national identity is not built on geography alone. It is built on shared values, shared suffering, and shared transformation. Conflict often forces nations to ask the hardest questions. Who are we? What do we believe in? What are we willing to fight for? Watching the U.S. struggle with these questions, other nations understood that identity is not born easily. It is shaped through trials, through moral battles, and through rebuilding after destruction. A nation becomes stronger when it allows itself to evolve, face its past honestly, and rebuild based on principles rather than pride. The world learned that the most difficult battles begin after the shooting stops. The American Civil War ended militarily in 1865. But the struggle to rebuild trust, heal emotional wounds, restore political unity, and integrate millions of freed slaves into society lasted for generations. Nations soon realized that winning a war does not guarantee peace. True reconciliation requires justice, empathy, honest reflection, and long-term investment in rebuilding communities. The global community saw that punishment alone cannot rebuild a nation. There must be understanding, reform, and a willingness to create a future that does not repeat the mistakes of the past. The Civil War became a lesson in the complexity of healing, showing that reconciliation is a process measured not in months or years, but in lifetimes. In the end, the American Civil War did more than divide a nation. It opened the world's eyes to the deeper truths that shape human civilization. It showed that unity cannot be taken for granted, that justice cannot be delayed, and that freedom must be defended not only with strength, but with moral clarity. It reminded nations everywhere that progress requires courage, honesty, and the willingness to confront even the darkest parts of our past. And as the world watched America rise from the ashes of its own conflict, one lesson became undeniable. A nation is not defined by the battles it fights, but by how it learns, grows, and rebuilds afterward.